latest book is called Method and Madness, the hidden story of Israel's assaults on Gaza, and he joins me now. Welcome back, Norman. In this book, you mentioned that Tzipi Livni, the Israeli politician, put off a visit to London for fear of arrest. How seriously do Israeli politicians take a legal threat when they come to Britain? Take us through, though, the Goldstone report.
The report itself was actually quite devastating. It was a massive report, and it concluded Israel was trying to humiliate, punish, and terrorize the civilian population, that it was probably guilty of significant war crimes and crimes against humanity. It was a devastating report, and it caused Israel real fears. They didn't quite know what to do with it. When the report came out, it was sheer bedlam and hysteria in Israel. People like Shimon Peres, who is so admired in the West for reasons which are completely perplexing. Shimon Peres denounced Goldstone as a small man who knows nothing about international law, and that was actually the most polite of the denunciations of Goldstone. Alan Dershowitz of Harvard said that Goldstone was worse than Mengele, the angel of death of Auschwitz. Michael Oren said that the Goldstone report was worse than Mein Kampf and the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I mean, it went completely berserk.
Miliband or David Cameron here, politicians here from the mainstream parties will say they'll always try and equalize it by talking about rocket attacks from the Palestinians, which I know you do in this book. You do say that Paul Wolfowitz, the neocon former defense secretary, U.S. former defense secretary, said that it would all be fine if the Palestinians adopted Gandhiist principles, which they're not because of these rocket attacks. Just take us through some of the analysis in the book about that.
Well, first of all, Palestinians have attempted nonviolent resistance, and we ought not to forget about that. You're too young, but unfortunately I'm not, to remember quite vividly the first Palestinian Intifada beginning in December 1987. It lasted, de facto, it lasted about 2 years. I lived in the occupied territories during that time, off and on. It was a truly heroic a display of mass nonviolent resistance, and it had a real resonance internationally. It was called the maxim the Palestinians used were the stones, occasionally burning tires, and so it was attempted. But it was Israel applied pretty brutal repression at the time, and it was defeated. These things are completely forgotten now. All the human rights organizations, B'Tselem, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they all report that Israel was engaging in methodical, systematic torture of Palestinian detainees. The estimates of Human Rights Watch were during those years, 1988 to 1990, the estimates by Human Rights Watch was they said, I'm quoting them, tens of thousands of Palestinian detainees were tortured. The harsh opinion of Israel has not translated into a positive opinion of the Palestinians. Still, if you ask to choose between Israelis and Palestinians, publics overwhelmingly choose Israel as the more decent party.
On anti-Semitism, which is in the press here, it was interesting because they said the rise in anti-Semitism in Britain, people were connecting it to the onslaught on Gaza. How have you seen the reporting of this?
There's no evidence whatsoever of a resurgence of anti-Semitism. What you find is periodically, whenever Israel engages in one of its murderous assaults, there's an increase, a spike in what's called anti-Semitic incidents. So you saw that during Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, you saw it again during Cast Lead, and you saw it again during Protective Edge this past summer. The question is it anti-Semitism? Here is a state that calls itself the state of the Jewish people, and you have a head of state who happens to be a maniac, and he goes around saying, I represent all of world Jewry. He said, when I'm going to Paris, he said, I'm representing all of world Jewry. When I'm going to the Congress to speak about the so-called threat from Iran, I'm representing all of world Jewry. So then you're going to fault people for taking him at his word? He's saying, when I say we should attack Iran, I'm representing all of world Jewry. When I say we should attack Iraq, I'm representing all of world Jewry. When I say we should attack Lebanon again, when I say we should attack Hamas again, or Gaza again, I'm representing all of world Jewry. So you have a maniac who claims to represent all of world Jewry, and then people take him at his word and think, okay, if he represents all of world Jewry, then Jews are a problem. That's the logical conclusion. So if there's anyone who's causing the problem, it's the state of Israel and its head of state who keep claiming that their murderous actions are in the name of world Jews. There's a simple way to solve the problem. Stop calling yourself the state of the Jewish people, because you're not. You're the state of Israel. And stop claiming that you represent all of world Jewry, because world Jewry did not vote you. Nobody gave you that title. It's not surprising that in the face of a state that calls itself the state of the Jewish people and the head of state who claims to be acting, that there are going to be anti-Semitic incidents. Does that make it anti-Semitism? I don't know why you would call, if by anti-Semitism you mean an irrational, which is generally how people try to construe it, an irrational hatred of Jews. That's not an irrational hatred of Jews.
Norman Finkelstein, thank you.
You're welcome.